Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about callback, the callback integration. So first of all, what exactly is a callback? A callback is a response sent back to the OIC after it triggers an asynchronized operation. So bear in mind this is used for asynchronized operation, and it enables the OIC to track the result of an external process, for example, the FBI import process, and it's typically sent from Fusion. Of course, FPGA happens in the Fusion, so we receive the feedbacks from the Fusion, but it can also be used for the other backend systems once the processing is done. So to talk about the callback, we need to understand what we are actually receiving from Fusion. So we need to understand the payload structure. Okay, now let's go to the OIC to have a look. This is one of the examples I have created, and this one is for the AP invoice import. So we have the trigger here, and now let's have a look at the trigger. When we create the trigger of this callback integration, we need to choose which import process we are receiving the messages from. Okay, so this one is for the import payables invoices. And there's an option, download preference. Please provide your preference for downloading the logs based on the overall status of the job. So I recommend using the always option. Always download everything, okay? And if we go to the next, and then close. So the creation and the definition of the trigger for the callback integration is actually quite simple. And now let's go to one of the mappers to have a look at the structure of the payload. So if we have a look at the left hand side, so this is a callback, and in the callback there's something called the ERP import bug data event, and then there's file reference, and there's something called jobs, and there's a child job. So the structure of this one, I have already downloaded it from the OIC logs. This is how it looks like. We can see that there are 3 sets of jobs here. So the first set of the jobs, they are the, if we open this one, it's got 3 child processes, and in each of them there's a request ID and job name. Okay, and there's a parent job. If we go to the job name, it's the load interface file for import. So the first set of the jobs are the load interface for import jobs. Okay, and after the execution of these jobs, the FBDI process goes to the next one, and the next job is the import job. Okay, and then it goes to the next one, is to upload the interface error and output file to the UCM. So from the callback message, we can get the IDs, the request IDs for the load interface file for import, and the IDs for the import payables invoices. Those 2 IDs, and we can see that for each job there's a status. It says succeeded. So we're going to talk about this, okay? This is something that is really important. The wording succeeded, it could be misleading. What does that mean? So succeeded, it means that the ESS jobs completed running successfully. So it doesn't really confirm that the data is processed correctly in the ERP. For different data objects, the system behaviors are different. For general ledger import, if it says succeeded, it means all the data is processed successfully, 100%. For the other data objects, AP and AR invoice import and the PO import, it could be misleading. For example, the data might be already rejected by the system. None of the invoices is created in ERP, but it can tell you that this is succeeded in the callback message, okay? Or it could be partial success. So some of the data is loaded and some of the data failed. So what we can do in order not to be misled by this wording, we need to do two things. The first thing is we use the BIP reports to check the interface and the application tables. And by doing this, we can know exactly for each single record whether it's successful or not. Okay? And the second thing is to build some custom logic in the callback integrations to find out those warnings or error messages in the interface tables. So how many records are successful and how many records failed to build a report and send this kind of information to the key users via the email notifications. So now we're going back to the callback integration to have a look how the custom logic is built. So this is a callback integration. After the trigger is created, and then we assign the variables, and then save the callback file. And by the way, the callback file is a zip file. We use a stage file to save this file into this integration, and then get some IDs from the system. And then there's something called the group ID. We get the group ID. So what exactly is group ID? It actually corresponds to the import set that was used during the inbound FBDI integration. Remember I talked about the inbound integration for AP invoices imports. There's one parameter which is a unique ID called import set. So this group ID corresponds to the import set. When we triggered the FBDI import process, the group ID was passed along with the data and it's stored together with the request ID of the load interface file for import ESS job in the database. So let me put this way. Load interface file for import. So this is a inbound integration. And remember I talked about this in my last video. When the inbound integration is triggered, we can get the request ID for this one. Okay, and then we can save the group ID, which is the import set. In the inbound integration. So we know this request ID once the bulk import is submitted, and then we know this one in the inbound integration, and we save both of them into database. Okay, so now they're in the DB. And in the callback integration, uh, from the callback message, we can get the request ID, okay, for the load invoice file for import for this job. And then because they are both in the database, so we can, by using the request ID, we can get the group ID, right? And this one is a unique identifier for this particular data import. So it could be used to interrogate the data in the interface and application tables. Okay, so once we get the group ID, we can get the data from the BIP report. So this is the first BIP report that we are extracting data from. Get rejection data. What does it look like? I can go to the SQL. So this is the SQL for the data model for this get rejection data BIP report. As we can see here, we're using the group ID as a parameter to get the rejected data from the interface tables. The rejection could happen at the AP invoice header level or at the line level. So it could happen at two places. So that's why we are extracting data from both levels and combine them together. So by using this code, we can get the rejection information. So by using this rejection BIP report, we can get the rejection data from Fusion, and also the numbers of the rejections. So this number can be assigned to a variable, and then we can also get the successful data from the system. Let's have a look at how the SQL is built for success. It's straightforward. From AP invoices interface tables, if it's successful, then the status is processed. Okay, the parameter is a group ID. By using this code, we can get the invoice numbers created in the system. We also assign the count of the number of the successful records into another variable, and then we use a switch to tell if it's 100% successful or 100% failure or partial success. Because for each different scenario, we're sending different emails, okay? And then update something in the database, and then move the files around because the files is the source data is loaded into a folder, into a incoming folder. And if it's successful, we're going to move that file into a success folder, and if it fails or partial success, we move the file into the error folder. And then finally, the callback integration sends the email notifications. When we send the email notifications, we can send the callback file as attachment. So if we have a look at the left-hand side, in the callback message, there's a file reference. The callback file is basically a zip file, so that's why a file reference is provided by Oracle. And then we can send it via the email. Before we wrap up, there's one more important step I want to mention, that is to purge the interface tables. So why do we want to purge the interface tables? There are actually two good reasons. The first one is performance. The interface tables in Fusion are actually the staging tables. So if we don't purge the data, it just keeps growing. And over time, it might really hurt the performance. And the second reason is to avoid the duplicated imports. So if the old data is still there, it's sitting in the tables, and if we want to re-import the same file, like for example during the testing or fixing errors, so in this case the Fusion might pick up the old data again. This will cause some duplicates or weird errors. Okay, so in OIC, how do we do this? Well, we use the submit ESS job request operation provided by the ERP integration service. Now let me show you how this is done in the Callback integration. So this is the example of the AR invoice import. And go to the next. The service that we're going to use is the ERP integration service. And pick up the operation submit ESS job request. And this is done. Okay. And then we go to the mapping. As we can see here, we need to provide the values for the job package and the job definition. And there are 9 parameters here. So we need to give the values for those 9 parameters. The second parameter is a request ID of the job load interface file for import. And we can get this ID from the callback message. So this is pretty much the things that we need to do in the callback integration. I'll probably explain more details in another video. If you have any questions, just let me know. I'll see you in my next video.